So here's a little episode about the psychology of toilets, and this comes from the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Zizek. So all these ideas I'm about to explain, you can find them on YouTube from him. Essentially, he says that there are different types of toilet in Europe. There's French toilets, German toilets, and English toilets, and each of these toilets has a slightly different design. So the French toilet has the hole in the back, the German toilet has a hole in the front, and the English toilet has this kind of bowl in the middle. And for a functional object like a toilet, Zizek speculates that for such a standard, simple, functional object, there has to be some kind of psychology at work behind the scenes, or let's say in the subconscious or in the superstructure. There has to be some kind of psychological background to why you would design the object with those three very distinct styles. So his theory is that in the French toilet with the hole at the back, there what you produce goes down the hole quickly. It's liquidated, it's dismissed quickly. The German toilets, the excrement is there on display. It's there to be inspected. It's like a sort of morning ritual. And the English toilet, everything floats. So what's the psychology behind this? Well, for Zizek, he speculates that French is a revolutionary society where you liquidate, you dismiss, like the French Revolution. You had the guillotine, you had the tearing up of the calendar, the evisceration of all the traditions before. So this is French kind of political, philosophical society, kind of radical society. The German society is a hermeneutical society. It's the first hermeneutical exercise, if you like, is inspecting your shit. It's the inspection of a text. There's the reflection, this kind of romantic tradition. Germany's very famous for its poets, for its musicians, for its artists, and so on. So, and the English toilet is this pragmatic toilet. You wait, you let it float, you weigh up the different options, and so therefore, says Zizek, if you think about these three different cultures, these three different psychologies at work behind the scenes, we can maybe have an understanding as to why a simple functional object, a toilet, has such different designs. Now, we shouldn't take Zizek too seriously, of course, but what's at work here is that you can actually sometimes decode basic objects, and that what you can do by thinking deeply about something is you can bring to the surface things which would otherwise be hidden. So then you can ask the question, well, what has this got to do with climate change? Well, we all have our everyday lives, but philosophy is very good at pulling out from behind the scenes some, let's say, invisible forces that might well be at work. And if you think about the economy, we're all, in some respects, preconditioned to think about growth. We're preconditioned to always insist that things have to, in a sense, accelerate. We have to make the most of every opportunity. And this sort of background grammar of how we think affects the way in which we go about our everyday life. In fact, maybe grammar is another way in which you can think about this. So I'm speaking to you now in English, and I'm not thinking about the grammatical structure of my sentences. I'm just using vocabulary as it comes into my mind and rolling it out for you in some kind of explanation. Now, I was actually never taught grammar in a very extensive way in the English system in the 1970s and 80s. Grammar wasn't a big thing. But in some respects, I didn't need to be taught grammar. In fact, it's quite weird if you try and teach a 3-year-old grammar. Things can get very complicated trying to explain, no, that is you is you, me is me, and you. A child just plays with language. So I can play with language now in my explanation of toilets and the psychology of toilets to you, and the ideology of toilets. And I can do that almost without thinking. I can do that with no explicit reference to the grammar which is governing my sentences. And it's this grammar of our thinking which is extremely interesting. this is, in a capitalist society, Karl Marx would say that the grammar of our thinking has been formed by capitalism. And it's something, in a sense, which is invisible for us. It's a governing principle. You can't break the rules of it. I cannot sentence, order, mess around with just if, want to, I, because then nothing starts, it just becomes a word soup. So we have to have grammar, we have to have background principles to how we talk. And there are background principles to the economy. And therefore there are background principles to psychology. And through the example of toilets, what Zizek does is he just speculates about these kind of forces which can be at work, which make us act and make us do things in a way which we don't realize. So these controlling forces, a bit like in biology you have Newton's laws of evolution, in physics you have, Darwin's principles of evolution, in physics you have Newton's laws of cause and effect. It's a little bit like that for the socio-economic dimension of things. So thinking about these things, simple objects can sometimes reveal things about how we act and the background forces that are at work in why we do things the way we do things. And just to zoom in really in a very specific way on how this plays out with climate change, one of the things mentioned in the Climate Academy student book is that we have been sold, if you like, because the fossil fuel industry invests a lot of money in this notion of the individual carbon footprint. Now, there's nothing wrong with thinking about your own individual carbon footprint, but the investment that the fossil fuel industry has made in that narrative line is exactly lined up with the constellation of values which we get in capitalism. The idea of individual choice, the idea of individual empowerment, the idea of individual action, and so on. So what feels like a virtue when you think about your individual carbon footprint turns out under closer inspection to be something which is a product of a capitalist system. Because really what the Climate Academy is about the systemic question, the structural question, if you like, the grammatical question of climate change. So we have to ask the structural question, why are we still 82% dependent on fossil fuel? And we have to ask questions about energy infrastructure. We have to ask those questions to all the systems of power, political systems, economic systems, etc. So in a way, what feels like a virtue, the individual carbon footprint, turns out to be almost a vice. And it's this difference between, in a sense, the surface level of climate education and the deeper grammatical level of climate education that the Climate Academy is committed to. So this is all about systems thinking, and in terms of these deep skills which the Climate Academy cultivates, it's also about problem framing. How is the problem being framed? And you can only do that in a sense with deep surgery. So that's why I've been sitting on this toilet, because toilets, according to Zizek, have some kind of revelatory capacity to expose to us these background forces and these background dimensions in a kind of grammatical way about how we think, which we might not realize until somebody points them out.